Hi everyone, just wanted to do a quick video, this time looking at workplace issues and returning to work, which I think is a huge problem for many people. You can get your symptoms much better managed at home, you can feel like you've reached an appropriate level of function, and then you're starting to look at a graded or phased return to work, and then how you can continue your management and your strategies but in the workplace, which can be really, really difficult. So just a few tips that we know have worked for other people, little ideas that you may find beneficial. I think the first thing that I always look at with people is look at what your contracted paid hours of work are, and then look at what your actual hours spent in employment are, because quite often there can be a difference. If we're employed from 9 to 5 with an hour for lunch, it's looking at, do you start at 9, do you finish at 5, or are you often working longer, starting earlier? Do you take the hour lunch break? Because again, that is really important, because we need to be making sure that the time that you're spending on your employment is the correct number of hours, and that we need to know how many breaks or how many rests we were able to put in depending on what your paid hours of employment are. So if, say for example, someone works 9 to 5, they have an hour for lunch, there is often options to be able to tweak the hours a little bit to make things work a little bit better while we're managing our symptoms and while we're building up that gradual phased return to work. An example might be that rather than having an hour for lunch, sometimes people will take half an hour for lunch, but then they'll use that other 30 minutes to give themselves 3 10-minute rests that they can use throughout, say, 2 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, or vice versa, but to split them up in that way. In the same way, when you have your 30-minute lunch, it's probably a good idea to think about how you're going to use your lunch time. So in some workplaces, certainly pre-COVID, possibly not after, but often we're socialising during lunch. We may sit in a room with other people, we may sit at our desk. So ideally we want to have a lunch break away from the screens, away from the day-to-day running of our job. So if you can leave and go somewhere else, that is more ideal. Some people will go and sit and have their lunch in the car, because the car is quite a nice little protective bubble away from everybody else. If you have 30 minutes, think very much about how you use that time. So if you have a packed lunch that you take with you, you might want to think about, after 30 minutes, first of all, have 10 minutes complete rest, then have 10 minutes where you eat your lunch, then have 10 minutes of complete rest again, then return to work. So you've made the maximum use of that 30-minute lunch break. The other thing is, while you are at work, it's looking at how you can use rest throughout the day. It does depend obviously what job you're in, and some jobs we have to be very realistic about. They're much more difficult to manage from a rest point of view than others. If, say, people are working in an office-based environment, quite often we're in open plan offices, so noise can be a huge problem. So think about things you can do to help yourself. Sometimes positioning your desk so you're facing a wall rather than facing out into the room can help, because it gets rid of extra stimulation that you can see around your screen. The use of silencer headphones can be hugely beneficial, because it just dampens out the noise of other telephones, other people talking, and a lot of patients have found that really helpful. Some people even wear dark glasses at work, so if lights, especially strip lights, they can be really, really bright. If your office is somewhere where they have the radio playing in the background all day long, again, that can be something you could maybe discuss with office managers or work colleagues, because that's an extra stimulation, it's an extra drain on your energy if you're trying to focus on your work and the radio's playing. That can really impact your concentration levels. So again, something to bear in mind. With any long-term condition, reasonable adjustments within the workplace should be put in place, but everything is at the manager's discretion. So it is a case of having a negotiation, if you like, when you're looking at a return to work. Think about your environment, think about where you sit, who's around you, what noises go on. Think about the different aspects of your job. Do you have to move around? Do you have to go to different floors? Do you have to travel out and about? Think about where you could put your rests in. Some rests can be official, as we said with the 30 minutes, you can split it into 3 10-minute rests. But we can also squeeze in unofficial rests. You know, we can pop to the toilet and have 5 minutes. We can be the person who pops to the photocopier. We can go and be the person who puts the kettle on and makes everyone a cup of tea because it gives us 5 minutes away from the screen. I've even had people who have been quite cunning and used the telephone as a way of just zoning out a little bit, you know. Sitting with the telephone to your ear as if you're on a call so people don't disturb you can give you 5 minutes peace and quiet without people coming up to talk to you because they think you're engaged in something. And that's been quite a useful, a little bit sneaky, but a useful technique that some people have used when they're at work to stop people constantly coming at them, you know, with information or want to discuss things. For people who work within community settings, if you are someone that travels during your job, obviously driving is a high energy activity, so the actual job itself will be energy consuming, but the driving between tasks will also be. So use your car as much as possible to have rests. If you go to visit people in your work from a community point of view, you know, after an appointment, getting in the car and driving around the corner and pulling up and having a 10-minute break, perfect. You know, if you're going to go to an appointment or a meeting, if you are able to get there 5-10 minutes early, sit in the car and have that break. If you start at 9, if you can get to work 15-20 minutes early, so you've driven in, sit and have 10-15 minutes in the car before you go into the office, because people are only going to start chatting once you're in there, but in the car you can get a complete rest, peace, quiet, no noise, total zoning out, then you can go into the office and you've had a decent rest before you start then your actual employment. I think as well, think about the hours that you work through the week. If it's a phased return, ensure that the phased return occurs over an appropriate period of time. I've heard of phased returns where people do a couple of half days one week and the next week they're expected to be in full time. So, you know, a phased return needs to be a gradual build up, and it needs to involve starting with a very small amount, so an hour maximum, building up to 2 hours, building up to longer, start every other day, build up to doing a small amount each day. So you need to be making a progression that ideally your phased return should be going over at least 4 to 5 weeks before we're built up to full-time hours. Obviously, as we say, it's negotiating with the manager, but it's about discussing that negotiation. You want the phased return to work and they want it to work as well. So we obviously want a plan and don't accept anything that feels too rushed because we want to build up gradually. Rest is the key. At work, but then at home when you come in on an evening, on weekends or days off. Make sure you get the rest in as much as possible when you go back to work to give as much recovery as we can to allow for the extra activity we've started to add in. I think as well from a work point of view, always think about how much we interact with colleagues. Conversation and social interaction is really good for our mood, it's really good to be involved with, but it is also exhausting if we're also trying to do our job at the same time. So it may well be that we have to ask about whether we can work in smaller offices, or occasionally we can get offices on our own in certain jobs, it's less frequent these days, or even chatting to colleagues and explaining that you're just not able to kind of have that social interaction while doing your job at the moment because of the energy needed. So you sort of have to zone out a little bit, whether it is with the silencer headphones or whether it's just kind of keeping a little bit quieter to focus on the task in hand. And if at any time when you're at work, if you're struggling to process what you're doing, if it feels a bit overwhelming, if it feels like it's just not going in, if you're not able to concentrate, just stop straight away. Take a rest straight away. Remove yourself from the room. Go outside for some fresh air. Have a seat in the staff room. Go into the toilet. Have a few minutes away, 5 minutes break. Just give your body a complete rest. And quite often that is enough that when you go back, you feel that things are a little bit more manageable and you can focus that little bit better. Thank you.